Good afternoon. Welcome to part 2 of my crypto update that I did yesterday. I've been spending heaps of time updating charts for annual closes and monthly closes and things like that, so haven't been as active as I'd like to be for the last couple of weeks, but then also we haven't had a great deal happening. Been a lot of messing around from Bitcoin, and we've had a bit of a run on the alts in the last week or so, but not much. I'm not going to go into too much detail on Bitcoin and Ether. I just thought I'd show these quickly. Like, if you want to know the proper updates of these, then go and look at yesterday's video. I was looking at bounces for both of these on 2-week demand. We've got that. We had an hourly demand made on Ether and a 2-hour demand made on Bitcoin. And both of those have held the retest, although Ether went almost all the way to the bottom, having not got very high into supply here. Bitcoin's now it's had this random pump. So I think the 3 o'clock candles off the back of some of the US news, and also possibly because the tariff announcement, which was thought to be today, from the Supreme Court saying whether they think the tariffs are legal, or whether it's legal for Trump to set tariffs, has now been delayed till Wednesday. So I think that also gave this a bit of a random bump along with the indices. So this did close, however, with an 8-hour demand. So we're just watching the top here to see if we're going to get a bounce there, and also a new hourly demand inside both of those. Ether still looking a little bit more sideways, but a little bit more bearish here. So there is a possibility these get a big bounce off the 2-week, but not massively confident. Still looking at possibility of short scalps above, but we'll just have to see what this 2-week gives us. But as I say, look at yesterday's update for the more detail on that. Again, I went through the others chart in a lot more detail yesterday, but just as a quick recap, because if I'm going to talk about alts mostly today, which is the intent, I'm not even really, I think, going to look at the majors. I'm just going to go through some of the alts that I've had hit on my watch list, so I can show you some of the structures. But just a quick recap on this. So we've got the bigger picture double top that we've been looking at for a long time. Then grouped all my drawings into groups, so I can show them more easily. Then we've got this head and shoulders here, which again we've been looking at since back, I think, the start of last year, last year, the start of 2025, and even the end of 2024. As we were coming down here, we had this predicted as a possibility, so that's obviously started to play out here. It's not the best head and shoulders, I have to say. Ideally, if you want a head and shoulders, you want a sloping down neckline, because that's showing the weakness coming in and the strength coming in on the sell-off, but the weakness and price not holding demand. So here we do have price that is still holding a support here. So it's not an ideal head and shoulders, but having said that, we also do have price weakness through this section for the better part of last year. Overall, I can just sort of show that more specifically here. So we have quite a strong up move here, we have quite a strong up move here, we have a weak up move here. Even in the very big picture, we have nearly the same scenario where we have strong up move here, slightly less strong, but still strong up move there, and then generally a much weaker price move on this leg. And this might be because we have such a disparate alt market now. Like previously, we had way fewer alts than we've got now. So what we do have, and in fact, what's making it significantly nicer to trade, is in the last year, possibly even since 2023, this whole section, what we see is certain alts running and other alts rejecting or dropping. And it means it's very nice to trade in both directions, and you can hedge yourself and you can de-risk, and like my alerts, it works really well on the alerts, because I haven't got to sort of worry. There are small periods when everything's dumping or everything's going up for short periods. And then obviously you just get a whole bunch of short entries all at the same time. Then you're obviously wary, you're not taking all of them in case we're just having a random pump. And vice versa. If I get a whole load of longs heading at one time, you can just wait it out if we're having a big drop, even in some of these periods here. So then zooming in again, predictions that we've had over this year, lower time frame to show this. we were watching for a long time this channel going upwards and looking at potentially getting a high around here. We did get an extra push on this, so we did get an extra channel up here, an extra push at the top, and it took its sweet time going down, but essentially followed this pattern that we've been watching for most of the year. And again, that's it's a weak, very corrective pattern with this final grind up here before we fell off a cliff. And again, this is something that we were looking for a long time. We were looking for a breakdown of that channel. The wick, however, has made it super awkward. A lot of alts have gone down into these zones, but it's like some people are saying, well, the wick shows a significant buyback. But yes, in traditional markets, you might say that because the traditional markets have liquidity and volume. However, there is such spread out volume in the crypto market, and secondly, very little volume in the alt market. So whether you can consider this a buyback, and also there was obviously the issues with the Binance API. So not all alts have most of them have the wick if you look at Binance, but not all of them have the wick if you look at other exchanges. So it's become quite difficult in this period that we've had since that wick to then figure out exactly what's going to happen, or where the bottom might be. In some cases, we've got alts. So with this wick, some of them have retraced like this to sort of midway down the wick. Others have taken out the low of the wick. Others have just gone back up from here. But there's a vast difference, and it's been again hard to sort of figure out which zones are going to hold where they've been wicked through, because strictly from my perspective, they're not demand anymore. The wick's gone through, so there's no buyers waiting to buy here because they've already bought. However, given the wick isn't on all exchanges, again, that makes it challenging to know if these zones are going to get picked up. And in some cases, that zone has been picked up, and we've seen, when I've gone into detail on the majors again in previous videos, where they've had monthly zones, weekly zones, like some of them have just tapped off the top and gone back up again, and others haven't. So again, it's been quite hard to judge. The other issue I've got with this now is that we did create 3 months supply, and we already had a 2 month. So let me bring back my more detailed drawings now. So again, if you followed my previous videos, I was saying, again, a lot of alts look like this. They had this grind down, and you can see the green circles where they were leaving a lot of stops above. And a lot of alts have that now, where they have a 2 month supply and they have a lot of stops in the 2 month supply. Or in some cases, the 2 month is now a 3 month, but was already tested on the 2 month. So again, the challenge we're going to have, and we're currently having, is whether an alt is just going to run straight back or up through all of this stuff, or whether it was going to reject here. So initially, when I was looking at this, I was saying the bull scenario, and I drew this bigger black line from somewhere in this PA, and I was saying, okay, we might come down into this daily demand here, this daily that's been run through, find support there, and then go back up. And then I sort of said, well, actually, that's probably a little optimistic to think we're going to go all the way back up there. There's now a 2 month supply in there, which was back at the end of October. And I said, maybe we'll come back up into here. However, it's still ground down for quite a long time, went quite deep into this daily zone before we've had that bounce over the last couple of weeks. And now, again, we're up in this provisional circle. So again, now we're looking at how much of this down move are we going to retrace? The stops make it possible that we can retrace higher inside. So the black line is still the bullish option if we're going to have a mini alt season. And even if this whole thing is ultimately going to go down, although I think if we did run this black line now, then I might have to reconsider a little bit this head and shoulders. But if the head and shoulders is going to play out, like now is the time, where we're going to come off this zone. The problem is now alts are looking so horrendous. A lot of people are saying, oh, they're going to go down even more. But again, you need to be very careful with the alt charts. I'm seeing a lot of people jumping into longs and with ridiculous targets, as people do. But you have to be aware that so many alts now have, in many cases, yearly supply above here, or 6 month, 3 month, 1 month. They can run inside because they're huge zones. So per this black line, maybe we'll get some runs on alts that go all the way back up to the top of that supply. That is certainly possible and common, particularly if the supply is weak, which again, in many cases it is. But I think it's going to be very, very mixed. So anyway, the lower time frame scenarios that I was talking about yesterday are we've now had this run up, we've hit 2 months supply, so really the red line is my higher probability trajectory here, unfortunately. And then it's whether it does bounce again on this weekly zone in here, or whether we get the bigger move down, back down to proper demand, 3-month, 3-week demand, all the way down at the bottom there. And what kind of bounces we have on the way down. Hopefully we won't get another huge wick like we had previously. If we were the more bullish scenario, obviously there's various scenarios where it can bounce around here for ages in between, but the more bullish scenario is a lot of alts now have created 3-day, 4-day, some cases 1 week and 3-week demands in here. So maybe some or all alts are going to get a bounce off this zone. And I've had a bunch of those alerts hit today, and we're just sort of waiting to see if they play out, but we haven't had any significant moves off them, I don't think. And again, are we just going to stick with, as we've had throughout this whole last couple of years, like I said, just a mix of alts where some of the ones with the more bullish structures are the ones that are going to run the kind of black line type scenario, and the ones with the more bearish structures with annual supplies and things are going to be more like the lower black line scenario or the red line scenario. But really, I want to see now alts coming down into these zones and what kind of tests we get. The other thing you'll notice here is obviously we've got now in many alts, we're building trend line stops below from the PA from the end of December. So the risk we've got, are we going to get a bounce off here at all? Like the red line is optimistically hoping we have some sort of possibly tradable bounce off that. Or are we just going to run through and take out some of these stops on the first buy? So that's pretty much it. So I guess the TLDR version is my macro bias is bearish on this. My mid time frame and high time frame bias is bearish. My low to mid time frame is maybe we'll get a bounce off here to go up higher, but I'm not overly optimistic about that. The draw for that is the alts that have these stops left above. And actually, you can see we've already taken out that initial green circle there, so I should probably get rid of that one. But we've already taken out the stops over this last drop, but there are still significantly more all up through here that could get targeted. And again, just depending on the alt. So I've got a mix of alts now hitting these demands, and I've got some also alerts today that have gone and are now testing the new supply, various 1 day, 12-hour, etc., lowish time frame supply up here. So we're just seeing if we're going to get a lower high on some of the alts at this point further for the pull down. So that's that. And then, so as far as which alts to show you, I was going through my watch list this morning. So for anyone who doesn't follow me or is new to this, I have alerts come through. So I set alerts on all my charts. Those alerts go into Telegram. So let me show you that quickly. So these couple have come through since I've been doing this video, but I have a Telegram channel. If you want to subscribe to this, then just look in my bio to get more information about that. And the alerts come into here, and then as and when they hit, we just look at what the structures are looking like, what the market's doing, etc., just to see. And then I also throw some analysis in this channel of things that I think might be interesting or observations I'm making. There's a whole heap of alerts come through on a daily basis on this. And when the alerts come through, I then add them into this layout, and then I switch them up and switch them around, or have other ones like the top row tend to be ones I've been following in more detail, trying to get more scalps off them. So CYS, for example, is one you just saw that I posted in the channel earlier. There's been heaps of entries on this, just looking for scalps, trying to scalp their volatility, while everything else was being a little bit more boring. So now just watching to see if this is going to get a breakout, still holding demand here. So we're looking for shorts in there. If it then doesn't reject hard enough, then flipping back to longs. It's being a bit slow. So the alts have been a bit challenging in knowing, like a lot of them have sort of strong up moves, but in knowing how much they're going to retrace to them where to find entries. They are, not as aggressive as they have been. So for example, here, if it's made an 8-hour demand, maybe there was a 12-hour in there, if my cross is a little bit lower, then obviously, essentially at this point in time, I'm buying the top, arguably. But then obviously you don't know it's the top at that point in time, and it could still get a bounce up to maybe come up to some of this higher historic supply, which I think is a bit of a gap on the XC chart, and some historic supply up there. But in this case, no, it decided that was the moment that it was going to retrace the whole wave. So this one has had some very deep pullbacks, but now has got some very shallow pullbacks. So again, you're looking at it's not necessarily that easy to judge. And then you can see on the rest of the market, or the rest of the ones I've got on here, there's a real mix. So we had a long entry on ICNT. We've got this black cross is from an all-time high on CLO, whether it's going to reject and swing fair all-time high, or whether it's going to break out from here. And then you're looking at the next demand, which is why I have the question mark entry there. Then ARCs hit a potential short zone, XCN also a short zone, Rivers hit a possible long zone, AIC has hit a long zone, and these are all varying time frames as well. Like some of them will be low time frame entries, most of them are high time frame entries. So with that said, let's just have a look at the watch list. So each month I set up a new watch list, and then I add things to it as and when they hit. So you can see we've only had 9 days of January, and we've got a huge amount of alerts already, and quite a few of these are also 2 or 3 of them, because I then move them back down to the bottom of the list when I hit a new entry. So what I'm trying to do is look at, so for example on this, just because I've got AIC open, it's hit a 2-week demand there, and then if I have a chance, I'll try and watch it and see if it makes a new demand that's worth considering or trading. So in this case, it's made a new 4-hour demand, so I'm like, okay, it's worth considering, seeing if you can get a scalp off here. You know, maybe you'll get lucky, it'll go out to here, but initially at this point you'd be looking for potentially just getting up to this local area, and then failing that, now, you know, if this is not the bottom, the local bottom, then I'll set an alert, reset the alert for lower down, and we have to see if it drops down into here. So yeah, that's typically how I do the alerts. And I'm just going to run through some of these charts just so you can see, highlight some of the things that I talked about on the others chart that we can actually see on some alt charts. So looking at EPIC here. So EPIC, so what I've done, and I haven't done the whole market yet, but in many cases what I've managed to do is go through and add in with the new major supply. So in this case, you can see EPIC's heading a 3-month supply. It's a big zone. And so my initial alerts, I'm putting some aggressive alerts in just to show the bottom of the zone. And I've said to the group, you know, you can't necessarily assume these are going to come off right at the entry, because they can go much higher inside. So we just need to assess them as they hit. However, if they do come off at the entry, they can have significant moves. So even if it's a big zone, it's always worth watching. And particularly in the case, it depends on the chart. This one had a little bit of risk because of the fact it's still got this sort of a few more trend line stops up here and this big gap up to the next zone. However, it has given a reaction off there. It has made a daily supply, so I've set a new alert there. So what we can say on this is that obviously the high time frame bias is down. We've had a down move. Now we've retraced the down move. Are we going to retrace the down move only to here for a lower low, or are we going to come up and retrace a significant amount more of the down move and then play out that 3 months? So those are the 2 major scenarios I'll be looking at. If you want to be safe, then you want to look at a fib from here to the bottom. I'm drawing lines, I should just show you. So you want to fib from the top all the way to the bottom, and then the 61.78 area would be the higher probability short. However, you know, you may not get that. If it does want to just reject here and go for a lower low, then similar scenario to what we see on others. I didn't put a long entry on this here because it's far too close to the 3-monthly supply. However, again, we now have weekly demand, and I've got an alert here on 4 or 5 day demand inside the week. Now, this isn't particularly high probability because, as I've just described, we are in a down move and we are hitting a 3-month supply. However, we're in that scenario where we're in a corrective move and we don't know if we're going to get something like this before that. So these are the considerations you need to give, and there is no reason also, you know, even if this does come down into here, bounces off here and does something like that, having made a new supply up here, which is looking quite likely, well, it's very likely that it'll make a new supply, but even that's a possibility. So once this alert hits, presuming it doesn't go straight through it, you're firstly looking for a reaction on this zone to see if there's something tradable to the long side, whilst being aware you're in a bigger downtrend. Then secondly, I'm looking at what's new supply is there. So as soon as this alert goes, if it goes, unless it's assuming we are going to drop from here, as soon as that alert goes, then I'll want to go, okay, what new supply is in here? And at that point, we'll still be at a higher low. So again, like we may not reject that, we could still go up through it. But I'm just looking at the possibilities of different structures. But those are the sort of major considerations. This is actually a fairly clean chart to look at for the considerations of how you're going to trade for the next few months, essentially. PONKE. Okay, so PONKE is a little bit of a different one. So in this case, very few like this, but in this case, this one does have a big annual demand in here. And it's an annual demand from when the market opened. So I don't know how good an annual demand it is. It's also got a monthly inside it. You can see that it's gone down into that monthly inside it. So this is, again, it's a possibility now that we've had this up move. We've had this big retracement into monthly demand and we get another up move. And these are the ones I won't lie, do find a lot more challenging because the bigger structure is potentially this could go up. However, we now have 3 monthly supply here and another 2 monthly supply up here. So yes, it could just run straight through everything. Alternatively, are we going to get, it's still going to break this downtrend and show that this demand is strong. So we could still get a rejection here that goes down, it can still go down almost to the bottom of here and still be in a bigger uptrend. So again, I'm still alerting here for the possibility of shorts. The other option is that we go up here, we come back, we've made a new demand, and then we do another corrective move. So back to that channel scenario before potentially dropping if we're going to turn bearish. So again, we're looking at what kind of strength we get. So at the moment, in PONKE, we've had quite a good strong candle, although crypto, I don't know if it's necessarily that good to judge a strong candle when that candle, I think, is just a day. Yeah, so basically it was a day of buying. There hasn't been, there was a bit of consolidation in here. You could argue that people were accumulating as it was dropping here and just clinging on for dear life. I'm not sure. It's actually made a new daily demand in here. Has run through some local supply, but again, the waves aren't that clear. So the other problem we've had with the trendline stops above, like I say, is that you can see here on the lower time frame, these waves are clearer. You can more cleanly draw waves saying down moves, retrace, down move, retrace, down move, retrace, retrace, goes a bit higher, doesn't take out this high and then drops down. The problem that we've got with current price action on so many alts is this isn't very clear. We had this, again, mostly because of the wick. So we had the wick and then we've had this drift of death. In this case, it's come down and taken out the bottom of the wick, possibly why that's had such a decent pump after that, because it's taken out the stops below this low. But can we say this is broken structure on the lower time frames when it's got so much chop in here and the big wick? I'm a little uncertain. Then on the top of that, you're looking at the bigger picture structure. So we've obviously got a big wave down here and then a big retracement and then a big drop here. So strictly, this is not going to turn bullish until it gets over, that level. And then it's going to go straight into supply, and then we need to see, has it made new demand, etc., etc. There's so many considerations when you're looking at all the different time frames. And in the case of this, I mean, you can watch this daily demand in here if you want to see. I've got an alert a little bit higher on that 3 month, and then there's a weekly zone right there. It does have some trend line stops here, so I guess we'll have to see. But this is one that could potentially go bullish. But now, unless you manage to get lucky and get in at the bottom off that swing failure, or you just were looking for three-day demand to hold there. I had my alert a bit lower, so we didn't manage to get any entry on that. I just saw it since the pump. Moving on, so we've got XPL. XPL is a really nice example of actually there were a whole bunch of people who got trapped in this from following people on Twitter. So there was a lot of FOMO and excitement and people jumping in here. You can see I had a couple of long entries, but then it just died. And there were people, and while I don't mind, the longs, when you've got this little price action, you've got a clear trend line there. It's really unsurprising this has run through everything there. I would have been looking probably for a short. Obviously, I had one up here, but for a short in that zone up there off these bounces, just because I'm always trading both directions where I can. But there were a lot of people touting this as an investment. And there were a lot of people who were buying bounces through here that are now, really have got quite screwed. And I saw them all jumping back in again here. So that be deleted. So again, this is a nice example of one that could run. Got a whole heap of trendline stops here, but at the moment it's rejected the major weekly supply. The first weekly supply has come to. So let's just go on to that time frame. So you can see I had a weekly supply there, it tested it, dropped down, made a new weekly supply, and now it's come up to test it. So again, are we going to be super bullish on this when really it's just a retracement of that last drop? It's hit weekly supply, and that the one weekly we expect a drop here. So again, this is holding, I think it's a 4-day demand in there, so it's holding a 4-day demand. So this is a aggressive possible short entry off the daily supply there based on this larger weekly. Then down here, we just need to see what the reaction is, if any. As I say, the bias is still down. However, we've had a bit of a decent retracement now. So is this going to turn into an uptrend? Could do it from here. If it is going to be aggressive, maybe it's just going to run through there. There's no reason you can't be trading these like more aggressive zones. Like I say, I do alert them sometimes. Depends on the picture. If this was in a bigger demand down here, I would have been more inclined to alert more aggressively here. If it hadn't hit supply, I would be more inclined to alert more aggressively. But where something's hit supply, then I try not to alert right next to price unless there's something that gives me extenuating circumstances, or unless the market's just suddenly gone extremely bullish. So in this case, I've just stuck with the low alert. So this is something with, again, not dissimilar to Epic, actually, with a lot less history. And it's also got a 3-month supply up here. But again, that's from the opening candle, so I'm not sure. Like, I tend to alert them. And actually have seen them work quite a lot, but I always get slightly concerned because in this case, I mostly look at the MEXC charts because MEXC tends to have the most history. Like if Binance started on the next day, for example, then this 3-month level might be different on Binance. But as always, you should be looking at the reaction as the alert hits and when we come into the zone, rather than assuming that something's going to happen. All the alerts are there to alert you, literally. They're not saying you must short here. They're going, okay, what's the reaction? Pick your time frame. I've got a whole educational video that's saved on YouTube if you want to go and watch that, about that says how you can consider trying to enter, the types of things you should look for, how you can develop a strategy. And there's a number of ways you can do it. Like I do it with supply and demand on the lower time frames, but you could use like EMAs, like moving average crosses. You can look at mini patterns, like channels, trend lines, head and shoulders, and those sorts of things. But it's going to be so variable. I've always been reluctant to try and give a method of how to do it, because there's so many different things to consider. So, for example, here, and also you have to consider, what new zones have been made. So, for example, here I would have had an entry here off for 4 or 5 day supply, and there at that pink area, I guess, looking for a short. But then I would put a long in because there is a possibility that this had swing fail of the low. It's made a new demand there. Is it going to come back and try and make a higher high? Now, in this case, that one failed. But you're looking at what's happened in between. With hindsight, that probably wasn't the wisest if it had just come off a 5-day supply. But I can look back, like I've set the alerts very, very quickly, so I know you need to consider them as and when they hit. So that's that. XLM. So this is, I guess, it could be a nice example of something with a lot more history. This is one of the ones that's more bullish, even with the history. So obviously it follows Ripple. So the yearly chart. My drawing, so you can see. So this did make a weak yearly demand last year. So that's not on the close that we just had, but on the previous close. By closing above this candle, it's weak because the wick ended here. It didn't take out that high. So essentially it's still in a yearly range. But if it's in a yearly demand, that means my bias tends to be ideally more to the upside. However, this to load, it also has just made a 3-month supply. So much like anything else, but now it's made a 3-month supply, perhaps, even though we're in this big weak yearly demand. If you have a weak zone, what you do tend to find is you're more likely less likely to get a bounce right off the start of it, or the top in case of demand, or the bottom in case of supply if it's weak. It's more likely to go much deeper in the zone. That's what I've tended to find. However, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a scalp off that level. But in this case, we have this big yearly weak demand. My drawings back so you can see, so the big grey area, and it's got a zone down here that's untested. And that's what I've said on Ripple for a while, that I wanted Ripple to get down. Ripple's made a yearly demand quite a lot lower as well. That I wanted Ripple to get down to that yearly for a test, and then I would like to see XLM do the same thing. So in this case, I've had an alert set. It's just coming off the 3-month supply here. It could go much higher inside it. There is an untested monthly all the way up here as well. And I think Ripple's the same. Ripple doesn't have this 3-month, I don't think, but Ripple has a monthly, I believe, all the way back up the top. So given this follows Ripple, maybe this will run up higher. You can see it's holding an old monthly level there. It's not really it's the top of that wick. So maybe it's, it's found support there, possible. So again, I look at some of these charts and I kind of think, okay, we've had a decent up move. Maybe this is an ABC, got a little bull flag, and maybe this is now going to run. That's possible, but what I would look for in that type of scenario is for it not to have supply in here, or for just wait, wait it out, look, watch that supply be tested. Like I see people, who'll go, right, this is a bull flag, let's long here and hold for the moon. And that's fine if that's your strategy. But for me, I'd rather kind of acknowledge that that's potentially what we're seeing. However, supply and demand win for me. So while there's still this supply here and this supply here, I want to see reactions there, or I want to see a significant demand made that makes it worth longing, rather than just assuming that this flag is going to play out while we're still, all the people just love to buy the bottoms, and I'm guilty of that myself. It's great thinking you want to buy the bottoms, but at least then, rather than just drawing the flag, again, like I said, watch your lower time frames. And in this case, yes, if you want to ignore the fact there's 3-month supply and you're trading the giant flag, this holding here of the monthly level, then that's fine. But wait until you get, now here, this is a 4-day demand. Not the nicest one. The 3 days a bit nicer. So, if you think that's the bottom, then by all means trade this 3-day demand. For me, this is not what I consider high probability. If I see this bounce and it go up higher and it start to make more of a move, if I see it break the last down move, so again, not clear because of this giant wick, but if we ignore the wick and just assume these are the down move, you've seen it break that bottom one. If I see it break, wick's already up there. It's not the nicest structure for this, but it's broken this last little down move here. So if you want to trade that and just see what you get from it, again, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I'd be more biased to down because of the 3-month supply. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Like, so my preferred entry, and while I've got this alert here for the 6-month demand there, just be aware again, I've got this big imbalance. That's probably a good example as well. The other thing to watch out for, even in these most recent up moves on the lower time frames, you'll see a lot of things have got quite big imbalances left. So while we've got 5-day, 3-day demand in here, this is like big green candles. It could retrace all the way back to the bottom of here. So again, I've got some of those alerts set on the tops of these 4 days, but these can still go in there and then run from a lot deeper. So just look at the lower time frames, see if there's an untested zone down here to get a bit more precision and a higher risk to reward on your trade. VVV, again, another example of one it was a little more aggressive on. So this is now it's got a 3-month supply up here. I think it was a 2-month, and we got the short there when it tested there. And now it's turned into a 3-month with a 1-month inside it. So this is one that's obviously been significantly stronger. I was initially looking for shorts. I guess that was a weekly supply down there. Yeah, so I was initially looking for shorts here on what would have been a weekly or 5-day supply in here. It gave a little rejection. And I think in this case, it should be green. Sometimes I drag my crosses around and then they end up the wrong color. I can copy and paste them. But yeah, I think at this point, got the rejection there, but it just didn't come back down low enough to test where I wanted it to. And again, this doesn't always happen. Then it's come up and taken out that level, it's gone up into the next supply here, which is a 5-day, and is now pushing continually push higher. And again, that's why I say you should waiting for confirmation or something to trade in here, not just trading blindly a massive up move. And in this case, it does have some more stops up here. It has got untested zones above. So it's pushing up higher. And I think I moved the long entry up to 4 or 5 day demand, whatever that is in there, if it does come back and give me a retest, but need to see a bit more on that. But again, just illustrating the same kind of down, retrace, down, and now we're retracing. And again, if we get over there, then maybe we're bullish again. And people would laugh at that and say, "Oh yeah, but you've missed this whole up move," and that's fine. I don't care if I miss stuff. Like if it had come back for here, then we could have got a long entry. Crosses burn in size. If it had come back there, then potentially we could have got a long entry. I've got other charts that it did come back to there, and we did get long entries. This one we happen not to. This happens to have had a couple of shorts. So I think I had a low time frame re-entry. Came up a little bit higher, so I think I had a re-entry. I had the weekly supply and then a re-entry on the 4-hour supply in there, and it came back down. Just didn't quite hit the demand in there. Even if I hadn't been, I probably would have alerted more conservatively down here, but it's just come off the top. Typically they do come back into my zones, but sometimes that when Bitcoin is doing a move, and maybe around here Bitcoin did a move, then and if all alts are going to follow, then you will find occasionally things might front run the zones. And now, like I say, we're in this giant 5-day supply. This did happen, as I gave that example of the imbalances we've got at the bottom. In this case, we've got this wick imbalance. So in this case, it's pushing up to the start of this up move and maybe up to as it wants to test this 3-month monthly supply up here. BBV, so up to higher time frames. Felt so much quicker when I went through these earlier. Trying rather than just going through every single one. Or I'll be a little bit quicker. So again, hitting 3-day weekly supply here. And I have set an alert on this that if we come back and get a retest of this, but again, still in a downtrend, still a very high risk entry on that. TLM, example of the craziness of the crypto market. Whether this was tradable, I don't know. I'd have to go down and look at the 15-minute or the hourly timeframes or something like that. But again, it's just wicked straight up into the 2-month supply and it's likely to die. So again, does have a 3-day demand in here, but in the case of this, then I would expect this probably off a wick like that. Maybe it'll get a bounce off here, but more likely it'll probably run through this eventually. Tag has been a extended consolidation. I was hoping we'd finally get a decent move off this, but then it did make a daily supply, so now it really just seems to be struggling a little bit here. Still was hoping for a move to take out some more of this PA up into higher supply on this, but it's looking like it might need more time at this point. But again, just trying to trade this in both directions, sometimes very aggressively here. I think in this case it might have made a weekly demand. Yeah, I think at that point it had made its weekly demand. You can see that. So it had closed this green candle over there. It made a weekly demand by a hair, but it came back to test it far too quickly. Like strictly when you've made a tight weekly demand like that, you would want to see a few more days of up before it tests it. If it tests it the next day, which is most likely what happened here, and it's hard to now judge. Yeah, so you see it actually is that. Oh, that's a Thursday now, so it took a few days to come back down. But here is when it went through it. So maybe we did get a bit of a bounce off there, but it came deeper inside it first. In fact, still really holding that weekly demand, but yeah, the aggressive entry for the bounce off the top of it just obviously didn't play out at that point. It came back all the way down to the bottom because it's working through the range. And as I said before, when I talk about the weak demands, weak supply, where the price retracing to the start of the move is basically because the weakness is more defining a range rather than a solid supply or demand. And a lot of people will call that out and say, oh, it's not supply or demand. And I completely disagree. To me, the whole chart is supply and demand. Like below the price is demand, above the price is supply. And it's what you're looking at when you're trading supply and demand is the how much you believe is at a particular level. So how many people at this level here at 0.35 are that? How, obviously you're not trying to quantify this particular number, but how many people want to buy at 0.35? How many people want to buy at 0.27? What is the intent of those people? Why do people want to buy here? Why was that a good long entry? Why is this a good short entry? What happened there? Again, watch my educational videos for more on that. Then STRAX, bit of a wiki one. So again, this is an example of it came off supply and it did come back and hold the demand for another push higher into what looks like a weekly level up there. May or may not give another one here. The other thing to be wary of, I guess, one other consideration is you've got an ABC. So when you have had an ABC retracement, I mean, this is a significant down move here and it's got a lot of chop, so it could very easily go higher in this case. But once you've had an ABC, just become slightly more wary of trading in that same direction. Again, if you're counter the trend, try and find another example for you to the top side. No, there isn't really one on this chart. Anyway, I digress. Stable, I had an entry here for a short on 12-hour supply. It's gone through a 3-day at the bottom here and it's flipped that 3-day to demand. Now in this case, we've got daily demand right here and this big 3-day below, but you can see this trend line stopped. So I haven't alerted the top of this. I haven't alerted where this is hit here. It's now also got a daily supply in there, so it gave a little bounce. Need to check this actually. I've got a feeling this might have alerted today, so maybe I did alert that daily. Or am I thinking I'm thinking of the other stable, there's STBL as well as stable, which I think are two different. Yeah, this is the other one. So I hope two different coins. Let me just check the price. So the price on this is 5771. And the price on this is not 5771. So they are different coins. But yeah, in this case, if like what you're watching for is, are the trend line stops here? Is it likely that it's going to, when you've got big zones like this, is it likely to wick deeper in? In this case, yeah, it's very likely to take out those stops below. Gave a few nice short re-entries on that. So unfortunately, it's one I didn't come back to, but again, what you're looking for hits the level that you want, starts to drop, makes a new 12-hour supply. You come in here on that test of 12-hour supply, it drops again, hits demand, becomes a bit more risky because it's hit demand, but you can see it's got trend line stops below, made a new daily supply, another short entry there. So this is a good example actually of when I said when you see the three down moves. So this is more like 5, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once you've done that and you're in demand, you want to be slightly like, while this has worked for 6 and potentially 7, you want to be slightly more wary of just shorting here, any supply that's been made through here, because at this point, once it's still holding demand, that it can still run like that. But until it gets down and hit to this demand, you can short relatively confidently. You can short re-entries. You can short, new supply. And in this case, yeah, it's got that big drop, big pump up here and a lot of chop. So I think I've just stuck with if we get a higher low here, then great. Q was a pretty nice one. Bitcoin struggling a little bit, the chart. Q is another one, and a good one to share for observation on some of the other coins. So again, we had trendline breakout there. So we were looking for long on this. It's held the 3-day demand firstly, had the wick just above, then it held second test, and then in fact held the third test. Now the challenge we had over here on re-entry, again, not overly surprising. You see here we have the trend line stops, but it still held for whatever bounce that was on daily demand. Came up into a weekly supply up here, and then it came back down. So I think at this point in time that, I'm not going to search all the time frames, but there would have been some sort of like 3-day or 5-day or weekly demand in there. Hence I had an alert for the possible long. But at this point, and I would have commented, the other thing is I tend to comment in the alerts, I probably wouldn't very likely would have commented that this has got trend line stops, so be careful. So again, just be conscious and send stable. I just showed you the same scenario on this. When you've got those trend line stops, look for those zones down back at the beginning that haven't been tested. And this was, just an alert for the retest of that 3-day that it had dipped inside a bit. Again, it's picked up the level. It's had the true demand, which is over to the left. True demand and new demand is anything that comes in here. So in this case, it came all the way down and then went in this. In fact, by that stage, I had a 4-day supply up here because I recall, and it went straight back up through it, up to the 2-week supply up there. And now it's just messing around. But again, it's got a weekly demand in here, and I was toying earlier when I was looking at this with the possibility of putting alert in there. Actually, at a 3-day, but it looks like it's run through that 3-day now as well. It's coming off 2-week supply, so bit of a challenge. But again, this is one of the potentially more bullish structures. At least it's holding on us, because you can't really count this as a pump at the beginning because that's just the opening candle. But at least it's holding this local range, so therefore there's a chance it might climb to the top of the range on this. However, again, I just don't want to be too aggressive on my long entries at the moment because I'm just seeing too much retrace deeply. Like, we're not in a market where aggressive long entries are tending to hold in the bigger picture. So when you're looking at continuation longs, so for example in here, then you can aggressively long. But once it's started to do a significant retracement, then I'm finding a bit less common for it to bounce, or maybe you'll get a little bit of a bounce here. And I'm still assessing. We're still getting this on this run, things hitting these zones, and to see if we get decent moves off those zones. But so far, I'm not really saying that. Do a couple that people like. So PEPE, show you the 3 months. So another very clean rejection of 3 months, new 3 month supply in there. So again, follow who you like and believe who you like. But if you look at the high time frame charts and the supply and demand perspective, I don't mean believe who you like. I mean more from the TA perspective. What TA are you going to follow? So yes, this could just be a bull flag that's going down. But for me, it's got 3 month supply. It's dropped. It's come up. It's tested it. It wasn't a strong 3 month. It's still not a strong 3 month. In fact, it's come down again. It's made a new 3 month supply. It's just tapped off that. We've got an untapped 3 month demand down here. Like, that to me is where I want to long. Like, I don't want to long particularly before that. And you can see I have got a 2-week demand tighter entry in there. But that's, the very basic when you're looking at any chart. Like, people say, oh, why are you saying there's a monthly supply there? I'm just looking at the 4-hour time frame. And that's fine. You can long this. Like I say, they've got a new alert in here for 2-week demand. You can long this if you want, but just know what you're longing into. So yes, you may laugh and say, oh, people laugh at me saying, oh, you've got so much crap on your charts. For sure, I do have a lot of crap on my charts, but it helps. And it helps to know what I'm trading into. And we might get to Phil at some point. Phil is a great example of that I was talking about. And I think I've talked about in one of my previous videos when I saw people just like with the pump we had in early November on Phil, which went straight up into 2 months supply. And I saw a whole bunch of people longing the top on that, going, oh, this is going to go to a new all-time high. And I'm like, well, just put, you don't even have to have all the boxes, but, just put the 2 month line on so you know what you're trading into. So the same here. So we do so this is similar to XLM, I guess, that what we had earlier. It has hit a daily demand down here. We do have this green level, and it's trying to consolidate around that previous all-time high from 2023. And maybe it's going to hold this. But we still have 3 months supply in here. And then there's another, there's another monthly and 2 weekly in that inside. So yes, we might get a bounce. Maybe we'll go up. Maybe we'll go up even from here. But while we're still under this 3 months, I'm still trading, assuming we're going to come down here. And for the most part, I would tend to be right on that. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But if I want to long, that's fine. Long when it hits a demand. Long in here, if by all means you can ignore this 3 months. If you don't care about that and you think, oh, actually, yeah, the bull flag's going to play out, but longer demand and shorter supply, don't long now, then that's my issue. Like, I may be wrong on this ultimately, that maybe this 3 month won't play out for another day. Maybe that will happen. However, either way, I'm not longing this now. That's something I've really anybody who's watching me to start thinking about, because that's the biggest mistake I see people make. Yeah, in all of crypto Twitter and any other groups that I follow, I look at things and I'll be like, oh, I'm long PEPE now. And I'm like, why are you long PEPE now after a giant candle and it's hitting 2 months supply? And then, there'll be like 5% of the time you'll get something like, what was it, VVB or VFY that we looked at earlier, where it does keep running up. Maybe this will keep running from here. Even if if you want to trade this here on this 12-hour demand, again, that's fine. It's hit a 12-hour demand. You've got a nice, clean, defined entry. Is my tool? Not the right tool? Yes. No, I've got it upside down, but that's the basic idea. If you want to long this and assume this 12 hours is going to hold and that we're going to go higher into that 3-month supply and fill this gap, if you want to use other criteria and enter, that's fine. But don't enter up here. Don't, at least draw your levels in and know what you're trading into. If this was cleaner, I'd be more inclined to look for a short at this point. And in fact, I would have done had I looked at this sooner. I would have already had an entry there on that 12 hours. So anybody who would potentially already be in a short. I know one of my group did take this short up here. And then you're in that already. You can bring a stop to break even. If it bounces here and goes higher, you get stopped out, that's fine. Or if it drops down to the weekly, take profit there. Or you trade this entirely based on the 3-month and you take profit all the way down here. You've got the patience of a saint and you're willing to put up with whatever funding rates are happening in between. But all I am saying is don't go, oh, I'm going to long now just as it hits 2-month supply of resistance. It's just utterly bizarre what I see some people do. So anyway, yeah, on PEPE, I did alert this, but I'm still very tentative on this. The same as what I've said on a number of things. We've got weekly demand, we've got 3-day, 2-day, 4-day inside it, but we've got trendline stops here. It's not really in a zone that I want to long in the first place. If this had come back down to the bottom of the wick into this daily, then maybe I'd be more happy with this long, but I'm not overly happy with that long. Less happy, and so a lot of them I've disclaimed. So you can see I put there 2-week demand coming off 3-month supply, so we know what it's doing. And again, we're just hoping for that maybe before the drop. But we'll see. Trying to think if there's any other structures that I want to highlight on this. PENGU, like it's in a monthly demand, it's kind of retested, it's on the way to the bottom of that. I don't love it. But again, it's made 2 weeks, so this is just one that I put a slightly more aggressive long entry on, just at that aggressive, because it's a 2-week demand there, it's got a 12-hour at the level. So again, just see what the reaction is. It also, in this case, hasn't hit any major supply. It hasn't made any major supply above. It's got a big space, if it did want to run up to this 2-week or even up to the 5-day in there. I shouldn't have 2 alerts on that, actually, listing my alerts. I did finally pay for, what is it, like the top TradingView one. It costs a bloody fortune, I have to say. Like, they kind of false advertise you into thinking, oh, it's not that bad. And then they add VAT or whatever country it is. I can't even know what it's called. I'm in Portugal. I don't even know what it's called here. I think it's called VAT as well. Might be, it might be. And they add that when you get to the checkout. So suddenly there's an extra 20% on it when you think that you were kind of thinking, okay, I can do that. And suddenly there's an extra 20%. But on the plus side, I now have 1,000 alerts. So hopefully I won't run out. It means I can put 2 or 3 on each chart rather than worrying that I'm going to run out of them. So anyway, PENGU is a difficult one, but we are, if we again ignore the giant wick, we are in this monthly zone. So worth looking for longs in here while this zone holds. And then if it doesn't, then I'm looking at coming back probably to the start of that wick. PENDLE. That's why I just thought I was looking at PENGU. If you can hear, there's a siren outside. Police are coming for me. So this has got another one very similar to PEPE, I think, although it hasn't tested the 3 months. It made a 3-month supply, it's come back up, it's gone high inside it, it's tested it, it's dropped down, made a lower low, made a new 3-month supply. It's made up of 2 candles, so that it can go higher inside. So you can see that I've got the alert there at a 2-month supply inside it. There's another 2 month there, so I don't know what that's just, I've lied. No, I'll have to reconsider. Maybe it's a 2 week. Need to go and see what that actually is, because I thought it was a 2 month supply, but it isn't. Anyway, and again, on this, my preferred long entries will be all the way down here. I've got something a little bit more aggressive on that at the moment. Yeah, that's a 2 week supply. No, I've obviously got, there we go, find a chart with an error. Why is that 2 month? Or I've used the historic 2 month. Yeah, it's the historic 2 month level in there. Maybe call 2 month supply. I'm just going to call that weekly supply. So yeah, weekly supply up there. And then I've got an alert. So it's pretty choppy down here. So really, the preferred entry, as I said, would be down in 3 month demand, but we could get some bounces sooner. So there's a 4 day and there's weekly, or but then there are, I think I put in the comment, yeah, but it's aggressive, but there are lots of stops below $1, and then we could go down into the 3 month in there. But again, this is one that I put a more aggressive alert on 2 week supply there. I'm just seeing what the reaction is. Does have a new 3 day demand. So again, if you think this is going to hold and you want to use that as your invalidation, there's nothing wrong with trying along here. We are at the bottom of the range. If others is going to hold this, it's very similar to that kind of head and shoulders on others, or is a bit more of a rectangle consolidation on this. But yeah, you can look for a long on this on that 3 day demand if you want to. Personally, I prefer a bit lower for a long. How are we doing for time? 56 minutes. Yeah, I wanted to try and keep this to under an hour, so I think I will try and wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. I think I've shown you a whole heap of really kind of good examples of all the things to look at on the charts anyway, but yeah, just a quick sort of recap for the last few minutes. Yeah, so we're looking at these macro major supplies that we've got in here, and my general bias is short coming off those. And looking for whether we're going to get a higher low, and at least, even if we have a mini alt season that takes us up higher inside the general large supplies, see what happens. But at the moment, the bias is down, so don't be surprised if something like this happens. Don't be so excited that we've had this run for the start of January, because at this stage, the bias is still potentially for a lower low, and this is just a hopeful re-entry at this point. I don't think if there's any other charts here that had anything exciting that I could show you. Not really. Oops. Yeah, the final thing. So I guess, yeah, probably one other comment's worth making. I mean, the newer coins are the ones that are more likely to run because they don't have supply. So yeah, you can stick with looking at the newer coins. And they also tend to have a little bit more volatility. So something like Night here, again, like I've said, I showed you one earlier. I can't remember which one that was now, but it was that the one the alert just went CYS, can't remember. But yeah, they'll give you more volatility, and you can get some decent shorts on this. And we're trying to get like breakout, or what they didn't give a retest, and we finally got some longs, then another couple of shorts on this. But just do be aware when you're trading these is that there are quite a few of these that have just died. Some things have just got some severe volatility like this, like light, Traddle. There's a handful of these that have just gone crazy and just suddenly run up through everything and then just die at the drop of a hat. But just be very careful on those. Don't hold on to these. Make sure you use stop losses, all the usual kind of things. Yeah, so I think that is probably it for now. Feel free to hit me up in the comments or in chat on Telegram. Come and join my Telegram group. Please like and subscribe if you're interested in this and you want to see more content like this. And feel free to, like I say, to put any requests in the comments. And then the next time I do a video, I'll try and get to those for you. It'd be great to have some more requests. Because there's so many alts, it's very hard for me to choose. I don't know what people are trading. Are they trading the old stuff, the new stuff, obviously the hype stuff? But even the hype stuff changes every 5 minutes. But yeah, I hope you all have a good weekend. Bye.